G'day and welcome to another edition of the Aussie Ideas Man. This evaluation is pretty much aimed at this Professor Real, who I have now nicknamed the Nutty Professor. And I do this because I think anybody who has expertise in the field as much as he claims ought to be smart enough to know that it's impractical. And that's just at the least. A really intelligent person in the field would see deeper into it than that. But the impracticality alone of it should be enough to make him not a fan. Now, I did set this thing off as a record, and I must admit, within 5 minutes I fell asleep. So after 5 minutes, I really don't know what he has said. But my main aim is to challenge this nutty professor, Professor Unreal, a play on his name, a challenge to engage in conversation with me in my comment section on this video. It's pretty simple. I'll make claims and he can counter them, or he can make claims and I can counter them, and we'll come to some understanding of what is real and what is practical. So let's just get into it.
Today we're talking about three things in the automotive industry that APTERA goes a long ways towards solving. And we're with Associate Professor Aunty Unreale from the College for Creative Studies in Detroit, Michigan. Anthony, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me today. Very excited to be here.
And you and I have come to know each other a little bit because of our mutual interest in APTERA. Could you give a little bit of background to our audience?
I'm a professor of industrial design, product design at the College for Creative Studies. Been teaching there for night classes and now full-time for about 14 years in total. I have also worked as a designer, industrial designer, for the good portion of my professional life. I have over 600 products that I've designed in the market right now through multiple industries. However, early on in my career, I did work within the transportation industry. So that would include anything with a wheel that moves. And my job was to create the specialty service tools to fix all these different engines, automotive trains, motorcycles.
That's why we wanted to talk to you today, because you have...
First of all, I can't think of any job in the automotive industry that covers the wheel as broadly as his job. Anything related to a wheel, and that's the scope of his job in the automotive industry. It is much too wide. This indicates to me that he's conning us already.
history and transportation. Can you go in a little further into that and some of the things you've done specifically?
Sure. So besides working on specialty service tools, like when you go to a dealership and they want to put your car back to factory spec, those were the type of designs I was working on. I've also worked on a multitude of smart city projects that include sensor integration at road level or at edge, where people are using cameras or whatever type of weather sensors and trying to communicate to the vehicles. So I've been parts of all of these types of strategies. I've had multiple conversations about how do you bring charging to different locations and how do you solve all of these infrastructure needs. This is one of the reasons why I ended up being really intrigued when I got into understanding about APTERA.
Oh, good. And also, as you're teaching now in your classes, you teach sustainability, correct?
Correct. I teach sustainability. It's around the Ocala method. It's really about making sure that you're incorporating the entire life cycle of a product from cradle to grave, and you're thinking about the sustainability of that material through its entire process. So even sometimes when you use plastics, right, which aren't completely 100% sustainable, sometimes it's still the best choice, because of the story behind what that product needs to do and what type of service it needs to provide. And one of the great things about APTERA is their choice and their attention to detail in materials, and that ethos carried through every single element in their design.
And that's what makes you the perfect person to talk to. We've established two things. One, you've got a deep history in automotive and sustainability. Two, you're way too smart for this channel. And that's what we're looking for, people that can give our viewers a different angle on some of these things.
Listen, I'm one of the viewers. I'll be full disclosure. I'm one of the viewers of this channel. I enjoy watching it. I really think all of this smart tech, there's always this educational hurdle we're trying to get over. In the human factors class that I teach, we talk about a term called cognitive load. And, that's how complex something is before someone can like figure it out and really like understand and like make it part of their own experience.
Wow,
So
cool.
with something like APTERA that has this really like fluid dynamic kind of shape, it already speaks to, you look at that and you're like, well, that's efficient. Looks like a spaceship and a dolphin or something going through. So
Perfect.
right, it doesn't need an explanation. And
It does need an explanation. It needs discussing. There are many, many factors that need thrashing out so that we know whether this unusual shape is right for the transport industry. Just think, the transport industry has made it well over 100 years and has not been successful with this shape in any part of that 100 years. Now we have a couple of snake oil salesmen saying that this is how it should have been done from the start. And I say that no, we need to discuss why the auto industry has not adopted it and why there are reasons why it shouldn't be adopted now. On the shape alone, there is a lot to discuss, but it can't be passed off as not needing explanation. That's incorrect.
oftentimes, as designers, I'm asked to design for what's going to be the next 10 years in the future, 5 years in the future. And it's hard to predict what those things are. Things I do know. We have grid infrastructure issues all over the United States. And we're not completely servicing that equally across the entire United States. As we transition to electric vehicles, there's been an uptick in the amount, I think, and please don't quote me on this, but I think it was around 25% more electric vehicles sold this year as opposed to like last year. And there was a decrease in the amount of like combustion engines as a proportion, right? So as we're moving towards more electrified vehicles, the grid's going to be a real issue. The fact that part of APTERA's ethos and their IP is around solar mobility, right? They've developed their own solar panel that is vertically integrated into their system that they can sell as a product besides the car to other manufacturers and other producers because it's automotive grade, right? That's a huge step. That is an absolutely huge step. So in the future, we need a grid that's going to handle all these electric vehicles. If the car isn't even going onto the grid, big hurdle covered.
This is another thing that needs to be discussed. Putting solar on moving vehicles before their time gets you nowhere. Adding more solar to homes and more home batteries will have an effect on EVs that is far greater than putting useless solar on moving vehicles. So if we want to solve a problem, attack it where it's best solved. And it's not by throwing it on a silly trike. And I'm happy to discuss it with him in depth.
Great point. And a lot of us talk about that. A lot of us are keyed into that fact that APTERA will even give back to the grid eventually with vehicle to load, for example. So that's one of the big issues that APTERA is tackling head on. But another one I want to talk about that you have some experience with is when it comes to recalls. We hear all the time about these massive recalls, like when GM had to recall the Chevy Bolt. I mean, it was like every Chevy Bolt for like 6 years or whatever. I can't remember. It was a massive deal, billions of dollars. And what is it about APTERA's right to repair, APTERA's plan of how they're going to produce the car that makes it, of course, not immune, but better able to handle situations or avoid situations like big recalls?
So first, despite all of the efforts that the big three and every other automotive manufacturer goes into to creating top quality and quality controlled systems to produce excellent vehicles, it doesn't take much to cause a recall. The amount of parts in APTERA is significantly lower than a typical vehicle, just from the frame, just because it is electric, the way they've put together the electronics and organized them and the wiring harness size, like all of those little details adds up to fewer part counts.
Can you give us an example, Anthony, from your experience in automotive where you saw the problems caused by these cars with all these millions of parts and what the solution looks like? How do you even solve an issue like this?
We had an example, one of the examples, of you get a technical service bulletin or you get a recall, for example, from Ford Motor Company, early 2000s. The Ford Fusion rear left wheel had an issue where there's a nut that holds the back hub onto the vehicle. It's just one nut, and it was drilled slightly large. What was happening is when the vehicles were going down the road, the back left tire was just rolling off because it wasn't attached. And it was just a certain run of vehicles that ran through the factory, but it was about 1 million vehicles that made it through that just had one bad drill bit when they were drilling one hole. Okay. And you know what? To Ford's credit, they immediately fixed it. We got a tool out to their dealers within a week, and they fixed those cars when they realized it was the problem immediately. They did an excellent job servicing.
So they had a problem where a tire's falling off the car going down the road. Probably
Right.
then the tire would pass you as you're driving.
Yeah.
You see your own wheel. And then they call you and say, we have to fix this, but we don't have even a tool in the chest that could fix this. Where'd the tool come from?
The tool to fix it. I designed the tool to fix it, right? So part of it was redrilling out that tool, giving them a proper depth and a proper tap. So when they screwed that component and that element back on, they could fix it to factory standards back at the dealership. So a lot of my times, people would design these cars, and for those of you that are car heads and work on cars, you've been there when they're like, okay, they put the fuel filter where?
Yeah.
Am I supposed to have like 4 joints in my elbow to get there? And when they would get to that level of design and that's where they had to put it, they'd come to a person like me and say, hey, we need to service this part. It takes us 6 hours to do it. Can you knock it down to 2 or 1 hour? And then we would work on a design to figure out that type of solution for them. It's important that, like people realize the level of precision that has to happen. It's easy to make one thing. It's extraordinarily difficult to make millions of things or thousands of things identically the same. So when you look at, like, let's say you look at the forged carbon body that was done by CPC Group for APTERA.
Right.
The tooling on that, exquisite. Like absolutely, that mono tub has all the fasteners exactly in the same place every single time. And that
All right, now I'm not even going to discuss recalls and how things are fixed when they're recalled because that has nothing to do with APTERA. It is external to the APTERA story. It's irrelevant. So I don't need to discuss anything there. He could be right or wrong, it doesn't matter. It's just irrelevant. But he did start on the fact that CPC has accurate tooling for accurate parts, and that's a good thing. I don't disagree. But we need to talk more about what's so silly about getting CPC over in Modena, Italy to provide the parts for a factory in Carlsbad, California, and big body parts that are hard to ship. There is so much impracticality in sourcing these parts just because they're a little more accurate. It would be better to make slightly inaccurate tools close to the factory at Carlsbad, California. Slightly inaccurate parts, I should say, not tools, and then get that persuader that Sandy Munro talks about for the odd ones that are out of shape and bang them into shape. It's much easier to bang something into shape in a few seconds than it is to watch the thing get on a transporter in Italy, go to the docks, get on a ship, turn up somewhere on the west coast of California, get off the ship onto another transporter and into the Carlsbad factory. All of that just because you don't want to bash a couple of parts straight. That's dumb logic, and I'm happy to discuss it with him.
reinforced structure of carbon fiber gives rigidity to that structure so that it is consistent. It is consistent every single time. That makes a big difference. Whenever you're doing body work and framework, makes a big difference.
I've heard of stories before. I think Uncle Sandy Monroe was talking one time about how they'll get a car and they've got to get the fender on there. They just kind of bend and twist the steel into the shape it has to be and bolt it in place or spot weld it and get it out of there. Now,
Yeah.
APTERA's going to solve that, right? Their product's going to stamp together perfect the same time, the same way every time, right?
Yeah, it's going to click together, right? Because there's more consistency within the material itself. So even when you're stamping with steel, right? If the steel's sitting outside and it's baking in the sun, and you go and you bring it into the factory and they go to stamp a sheet out of it, it's going to take a different form than if it's 32 degrees outside and you bring that steel in and it's cold. It's literally going to form differently. It's going to be expanded differently, and it's going to change. And it's going to work. And they try to keep like that wiggle room in the tolerancings and stuff. But that's what creates squeaks. That's what creates rattles in the car, and people don't like that.
All right. Now, I have nothing to do with manufacturing. My career ended as a computer programmer, but even I can see through that poor logic. If the problem is that the steel you use before it gets into the production line has differing temperatures, then just have a room where the temperature is controlled and put the steel from outside with its varying temperatures into that room for enough time for it to match the controlled temperature that you want. Then they're all the same. Then you can have that accuracy. The problem is solved.
So APTERA solves this by consistent parts, fewer parts, and then also the right to repair. How do you see the right to repair being a benefit when it comes to something happens like, we wish this would have been different, or this needs to change. How can I at my house fix my APTERA? I mean, that's the gold standard.
I'll just add at this time, after Chad, that when it was a composite fiberglass body, a small front subframe bolted to the body and a small rear subframe bolted to the body, and there was nothing in between. When they went to CPC, this is what happened. The subframe at the front and back had to have a pretty large steel frame. They're going to make it aluminium, but it's steel at the moment. We know about that. But this pretty large steel frame between the two, that's an additional part, and it's a big part. But not only that, it also had to have a roll cage added to that steel frame, and that's a substantial weight. So while the initial idea was pretty good, it has been watered down by turning to CPC, all for these accurate parts that they have to send halfway around the world to get to I was going to say to get to the factory, but there is no factory to get to that empty warehouse at present.
So as somebody who has obviously profited from the tool repair business and tool making to fix automotive cars, that's why I don't do it anymore. Is I got a little burnt out on it because there's all this engineering, there's all this design, and all these things are creating. And one thing I realized is they break. Cars, no matter how well they design, they are going to break. So you need to minimize the amount of moving parts and the simplicity to access all these different components. So in terms of moving parts on the APTERA, you got wiper blades, you got a steering wheel, you got door hinges, you got suspension, you've got the electric motor coming in, like the CV joint, all that stuff, and that front little assembly, right?
That's it.
And that's it. Like thousands of less. Now the other thing that I like is all of these components are approximately person size, right? There's nothing that's going to require a real special engine lifting hoist. The accessibility of those components, like the suspension components, you can just see them, right? They're out there. You take those cowls off on the bottom and on the front. It's all exposed. It's super easy to access, right? That's a big hurdle. And then the fact that, specialty tools aren't going to be needed to service that. I probably have a full crescent set in the garage will do probably 90% of what needs to be done.
That's awesome.
That's huge.
That's awesome. I had a Ford 500. I think that was my last gasoline car Sarah and I had. And the alternator went out. In my whole life, I can change an alternator or starter, as can my wife, Sarah, no problem. But this thing, I had to remove the front axle to get the alternator out of the car to replace it. Just ridiculous.
Because you didn't have the engine lifting hoist.
That was the other option, right? Lift the engine.
there was lift the engine, and I had to make a double bended connection point that connected to the bottom of that motor, because they use that in the Ford 500 as well, to connect to the bottom, that you could lift it up and keep it stable. Because if you didn't keep it stable, it would crush the compressor on the air conditioner on the front of the vehicle.
Oh,
So like it's like they have these large vehicle systems, and it is incredibly difficult for all the different people involved in creating them to speak and communicate. So for example, even when we did the recall tool with Ford, and again, all of them have different processes, but a lot of the big auto manufacturers, to make a change, something like that, there's between a 20 to a 32 step process to go through, because there are so many different things you need to know about vehicles, about all the parts in the vehicles and why they're there. The great thing about APTERA is because they're young, they're nimble, they don't have that legacy overhead and cost in the design development, and they are not currently politically tied in a way internally that causes those types of struggles. So we're getting to see clean slate design from somebody offering a singular vehicle. So they get to do things that bigger companies just can't do well.
so how does that work if they've got to go through a 20 or more point validation on this tool they had you create? They must have given you, what, a year and a half to design it, to make it, to produce it, to ship it, and to go through 20 or 32 steps of bureaucracy.
No. So when they come to you with this type of issue, and there's a million cars out in the field that want to be sold, they're sitting on dealer lots, right? That's money that's not moving.
Yeah.
They came to us, I think it was on a Wednesday. We had to have the tool designed, manufactured, and in their dealerships, and we had it there by Monday.
Whoa.
It was an all hands on deck, get this done. These guys are losing millions of dollars for every day they're not selling these vehicles. And one of the engineers, he told me, he goes, well, you got to go through the process to get this approved. And I said, you need this on Monday. Whatever you need to tell those 20 people, you need to tell them. I'm moving forward because this works. Because we went out, we validated it, we screwed them on, we tested it. We did the rigor that was going to be done. Whoever you need to tell, just tell. Right?
Just fill in the forms, send the forms. Yeah. I don't care. Let's get this out there.
When there's time to do it right, there's absolutely time to do it right. But when that time is coming with $100 bills every second, you need to move. You need to hustle. So
it's no wonder I fell asleep. He's still totally irrelevant, talking about recalls at Ford, and he's blowing his own trumpet and it's waffling on. A professor should really just get to the point. He's here to justify the existence of APTERA. Just stay on point. Stick to the facts. I have a word for people like that, and I've often used it. It's called a scatterbrain. If you're an expert in something, you know when you're off track. So this indicates to me that he's no expert. Certainly not in APTERA. I started this video wondering how he could be a fan, and I'm starting to realise why.
And that's one of the great things about Michigan and our manufacturing base and all of this knowledge that we have here in the automotive industry. We can do and react that way so quickly. So, not talking bad about any of the other automotive people and what they're doing. It's just these guys get to play in a different sandbox.
It's okay.
We can see it in the design.
It's okay to say Michigan's best when it's true, Professor. It's fine.
Okay, now I'll talk about APTERA so far. So they get to play in a different sandbox, and that's a big advantage. That's what he's saying. Big advantage. Steve Fambro started this idea in 2005. That's 20 years ago. He's got to play in a different sandbox, and he has got nowhere. The guy just gave this irrelevant example of fixing a recall and doing it between Wednesday and Monday. So Fambro's 20 years of playing in a different sandbox just doesn't add up.
So we talked a little bit about how APTERA takes on the grid issues head on. Now we've talked about how these big massive recalls could be at least vastly reduced when it comes to APTERA. The third thing I wanted to talk about, and I want to get back to some of these other things too, but I want to talk about something you said a while ago about rattles and squeaks, because my Nissan Leaf had a encounter with the rear end of somebody's Honda with my wife at the wheel, and we got it smashed back together, but now it makes all kinds of unfortunate noises. It's just a weird thing. It don't matter how much it looks like it's together. So when you said rattles and squeaks and how APTERA can solve that, squeaks, give us an idea of what you're talking about from your experience.
So I designed a squeak and rattle tester.
Squeak and rattle tester.
A squeak and rattle tester. It was a group of engineers, and we got together. It was a fun thing. I don't know if you've ever been to the theater and you felt those bass shakers under your seat. It's those speakers that kind of vibrate up and down. So basically, we take one of those bass shakers and we would mount it to the frame. And then once we mount it to the frame, we take the audio output from a driver, like on a computer, and we send a whole frequency sweep from the low end unaudible all the way up to the high end. And what we're doing is we're trying to simulate the noises and the tones and the frequencies generated from your car rolling on the road. And as we're sweeping up and we start getting vibration between two different panels, we can pause at that frequency when we hear a noise, and then we can find where that's vibrating because it'll continue to vibrate. And so then a couple of ways we fix that, like just like you were saying about your niece's car. We would go to where they put it together. Maybe it's not bolted together to proper tolerance. Maybe they forgot a piece of sound dampening that was originally there. Maybe we just put a little piece of sound deadening material. There's a lot of different sound deadening materials that you can put on that to kind of make that go away. So it's about improving rider comfort and experience in the car. And when I imagine myself, and I do, I imagine myself driving an APTERA. So just make no doubt about it. Full disclosure, I had invested in the company early on because I want them to be successful, right? And I feel like we need, as people that are part of the community and have this type of experience, like speaking up is so important.
Yeah,
and that's why I'm talking.
Very glad you're adding your voice to the conversation.
Well, now he can add his bubble and squeak, rattle and squeak detector to APTERA. He can lend it to them because so many people have said that this thing rattles and squeaks way too more than it's acceptable. In fact, on a lot of the videos that you watch somebody driving in it, you can hear the squeaks and you can see the vibrations.
We really appreciate it. So that's pretty interesting. Now, when it comes to the APTERA, and it comes to, at least in initial production, squeaks and vibrations, what is it that's different enough about the way this car is going to be produced that might eliminate the use for your tool and maybe cut into your profits?
If you look at the way the APTERA frame is put together, it is bonded along with clicking together. There is a minimum of 6 parts. The carbon fiber itself has a different rigidity and acoustic property than what a standard stamped metal or formed piece is going to have. Okay, so it's.
Let me just correct him there. If you're going to brag about the number of parts, don't say there's a minimum of 6 parts. Say there's a maximum of 6 parts. It makes all the difference.
It's going to adapt better to even being padded. It's going to be, in my opinion, haven't sat in one yet, it's going to be really quiet when it goes down. I think one of the big topics in the future is what's the quietest tire I can get for my EV, because that's the only thing I hear is that tire rolling on the ground. Right?
That's it. Is there anything you think you'd like to add to the issue of the grid tax?
So if we want to talk about APTERA and every journey powered by the sun, which is their tagline, it is incredibly important. So when I was working in the smart city space, one of the big issues we would have is we'd make these really intelligent street poles that had every single possible sensor, audio, emergency call buttons, cameras, AI, traffic monitoring, people monitoring, banners, like whatever you wanted, we could make it happen at edge and on the street. And people would ask us, I want electric vehicle charging. And then we'd always have to go, sorry, we can't. And they're like, well, why can't we? We're like, well, the grid that's set up there, the circuit that is running those street lights where you want to tap into the power is already maxed out most of the time. It's already designed to just run those street lights. So you would have to run a whole nother electrical feed. Now, if you're going to be running that amount of feed and you're talking let's talk EV Hummer for a second, right? It's not the most lightest sipper of the juice on the line that exists.
Well put.
Cool car, right?
Cool car.
Cool car. Absolutely cool car. But it takes a big tank to fill it up, right? If you're trying to charge one of those vehicles, you're going to need 220 or even 420 on the street to really deliver current in a meaningful way. Well, you can't have a bunch of 220 and 420 in a row. It wrecks something called the power factor. Okay. And so, when you have your circuit in your house and there's it's 60 hertz, right? That's the wave at which and how many the frequency at which that electricity comes in. If you've got a bad power factor, it's because you're yanking on that frequency and you're causing like a ripple. Do you ever see your lights kind of dim when the compressor starts up?
Yeah, for sure.
The power factor in your home. You've got these really big electric vehicles all lined up in a row, pulling at the same point. Man, does it affect the grid? So the grid isn't set up to kind of work that way. It needs to be load balanced. So you have to spread out where the charging stations are if you don't update the infrastructure.
Right.
That sounds like a lot of money to me.
Oh yeah.
Right? And they're not going to put that everywhere. And the fact that, currently I drive a Ford Fusion plug-in hybrid. I love it. It has been my favorite car that I have currently owned. In the life cycle of that vehicle, it's got 98,000 miles on it. I've averaged 72 miles to the gallon. It's got a gasoline tank, takes a 12-gallon tank, but with my driving patterns, that's what I've averaged. And I love fishing. I drive up north all the time. I go on long road trips and I come back. So that's not using electric all the time. But in terms of efficiency, it's amazing. And when I look at the size to get me, because it only adds about 20 miles additional of range to my vehicle, when I look at about the size of the battery that's in there and about the size of a battery that would be in an APTERA, it's not even apples and oranges when it comes to efficiency.
Yeah,
it's
cool.
It's not even the same. Yeah. So I'm looking at this going, well, energy prices are going up, right? The cost of electricity is going up. What can I do to reduce the burden upon myself? And I'm like, well, how about I get a car that I don't need to plug in except at most 2 times a year? And to be quite honest, the grocery store, Myers, will give me free charging for the first hour. And an hour of charging of APTERA is probably with going to the grocery store, as I will never pay to charge that vehicle.
It's just...
Once again, he waffles and it doesn't make sense. He talks about the grid and the strain on the grid, the problems with it. Now, if you didn't have solar cells on the APTERA, your solution would be in your solar system and the battery that you have that stores that solar if you want to go a step further. But in either case, you get free miles from your solar. There is no need to add load to the grid. You have a solution, so you don't have to blame an overused grid and say that your next vehicle needs this very impractical thing called onboard solar. Just use the solution that's available to you. He even hinted on the fact that he can go shopping and get free power from the shopping centre. Hopefully that shopping centre has solar all over its roof and batteries. There's no need for even the shopping centre to overload the grid. The solution is in solar and batteries. The grid does not have to be involved whatsoever. And once again, I'll put it to him. There's a challenge. Discuss these things in depth with me, and I will prove to you that your logic is flawed.
It's unbeatable. It's just such an incredible vehicle. So those are the big three we wanted to talk about: the issue with the recalls, the issue with the fit and finish that can lead to rattles and squeaks, and of course what it does to the earth and taking too much from the grid when the grid is not ready for it. And APTERA is taking all three of these issues head on. Thank you for sharing these thoughts with us from your point of view with someone who has experience, Professor. We really appreciate you.
I love supporting APTERA because I want to support as many green energy products as possible because we need it.
Yeah, we do. And I got the chance to see your TEDx talk, and I know most of my audience hasn't yet. Where can we go to find out? Where can we get a link to that? And where can we find out about some of the other hundreds of projects you've worked on? I think our audience wants to know more about you.
Absolutely. You can go to AuntyUnreale.com. It'll be probably down in the comments. You can also click like on this video. That would be great.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor. I appreciate it. Hey, thank you to the members of the channel. You're the ones that keep the wheels churning on the Positively Charged YouTube channel. Thank you.
Well, that's all from me. Bye for now. Stay safe.